The courtroom was warm, almost stifling, and the chatter of people waiting for the next case filled the air. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, making the polished wooden benches shine. Everyone seemed tense, moving quietly, shifting papers or murmuring softly to one another. Among the crowd, a teenager walked nervously toward the front. He was dressed neatly in a plain shirt and trousers, and carried himself with a quiet composure that seemed almost deliberate. Most of the people in the courtroom barely paid him any attention. To them, he was just another young person caught up in some minor legal matter. The judge presiding over the case was a stern figure, known for his sharp tongue and quick judgments. He had a reputation for being strict, and sometimes his words could feel harsh. He looked down from his bench, scanning the room, his eyes lingering on the teenager. "Next case," he barked, and the teenager stepped forward, his movements careful and controlled. "State your name for the record," the judge said, his tone heavy with impatience. The teenager spoke clearly, his voice calm. "My name is Daniel, Your Honor." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And how old are you, Daniel?" 17, Daniel replied without hesitation. His words were steady, but there was a quiet confidence beneath them that seemed unusual for someone so young. The judge leaned back, a small smirk forming. 17, he said almost to himself. "And you think you understand what's happening in this courtroom? Let's see how much you actually know." A ripple of murmurs moved through the courtroom. People exchanged glances, sensing that this was going to be uncomfortable. Daniel didn't flinch. He had faced judgment before, but never in a place like this. The case itself was minor, at least on the surface. It involved a dispute over a school project, something that seemed trivial compared to the serious cases the court usually handled. But Daniel knew that even small matters could reveal a lot about people and the law. "Your Honor," Daniel began politely, "I believe there has been a misunderstanding regarding the submission of the project. I would like to explain my side of the matter." The judge's smirk turned into a dismissive frown. "Explain your side? You're a child. Do you think this court has time to listen to your childish stories?" Daniel paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I understand that I am young, but I have reviewed the rules and procedures carefully, and I believe my explanation is relevant and supported by evidence." The courtroom went silent. The judge frowned, clearly surprised that Daniel spoke with such confidence. Most teenagers would have stumbled or been intimidated, but Daniel remained composed, his hands resting calmly on the table in front of him. "Evidence?" the judge said, his voice sharper now. "What kind of evidence could a teenager possibly have?" Daniel reached into his folder and pulled out neatly organized papers. "I have records of the project submissions, emails with the teachers, and a timeline showing when the work was completed. I believe these documents show that the misunderstanding was not my fault." The judge glanced at the papers, then back at Daniel. There was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes, quickly replaced by the same old sternness. "You expect me to believe that all of this is accurate? That you, a 17-year-old, understood all the rules better than the adults involved?" Daniel nodded politely. "Yes, Your Honor. I have taken the time to ensure everything is accurate and properly documented." A few spectators in the courtroom leaned forward slightly, whispering among themselves. It was unusual to see someone so young handle themselves with such precision. They could feel that there was more to this teenager than met the eye. The opposing side, a teacher representing the school, looked skeptical. They had assumed this would be an easy case, a quick dismissal. But now, seeing Daniel speak with clarity and confidence, they began to reconsider. The judge's tone grew colder. "Young man, let's not waste the court's time. Keep your explanations brief." "I am not here to be entertained by a teenager's clever words." Daniel remained calm. "I will be concise, Your Honor. I only wish to present the facts so that the court can make an informed decision." The judge sighed, clearly frustrated that the teenager was not intimidated. "Very well. Present your facts. But be quick about it." Daniel began to explain the sequence of events. He spoke slowly, making sure each point was clear. He referenced dates, correspondences, and specific guidelines that governed the project submissions. Even though the information was technical, he delivered it in a way that was easy for the court to understand. The judge listened, initially with a skeptical frown. But as Daniel continued, a subtle change occurred. The clarity of his explanations, the precision of his evidence, and the confidence in his voice made it hard for anyone in the courtroom to dismiss him outright. "Objection," the teacher interjected suddenly, trying to regain control. "He's not a professional. He's a student. This information is irrelevant. Daniel remained composed. With respect, the information is directly relevant because it shows that the process was followed correctly. I am not claiming to be a professional, but the facts themselves are clear and verifiable. The judge rubbed his temples, clearly struggling to maintain his authority. It was unusual, even unsettling, to be challenged in this way by someone so young. He glanced around the courtroom, seeing a mix of astonishment and curiosity on the faces of the spectators. Daniel continued, never raising his voice, never showing frustration. He simply presented the evidence and explained the reasoning behind it. Each point he made was supported by documentation, and each response was precise and respectful. At one moment, the judge's expression shifted from skepticism to disbelief. He had expected the teenager to falter, to stumble under pressure, but instead Daniel had demonstrated a level of preparation and understanding that was far beyond his years. Enough, the judge finally said, leaning forward. I have never seen a teenager present a case like this. You have clearly put a great deal of effort into this. But let's remember, you are still very young. The court must consider your age and experience. Daniel nodded. I understand, Your Honor. I only wish for the truth to be considered. That is all I ask. For a moment there was silence. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Daniel's composure, his calm demeanor, and the accuracy of his presentation had shifted the atmosphere. The murmurs of doubt were replaced by a growing sense of respect, even from those who had doubted him from the start. The judge leaned back, clearly processing what he had witnessed. He had underestimated this teenager completely, assuming that youth meant inexperience and lack of knowledge. But now he was forced to reconsider. The teenager before him was not just knowledgeable. He was precise, logical, and surprisingly articulate. As Daniel quietly waited, the judge finally spoke again, his voice less harsh, tinged with an unfamiliar respect. Very well. I will review the documents and consider your explanation carefully. This is unusual, but I cannot ignore the clarity of your presentation. The teenager nodded, a small, polite smile on his face. He had not sought to impress anyone with arrogance or showiness. He had simply presented the facts calmly and confidently, as he knew they should be presented. As he stepped back from the stand, the spectators whispered among themselves. They had witnessed something remarkable. Here was a teenager who, against all expectations, had commanded attention through knowledge, composure, and preparation. The judge, usually so quick to belittle, had no choice but to pause and reconsider his assumptions. Outside the courtroom, people would later speak of this moment with awe. They would remember the quiet confidence of the teenager, the way he had faced authority without fear, and the way his words had carried weight far beyond what anyone could have expected from someone his age. And for Daniel, this was only the beginning. He knew that appearances could be deceiving and that sometimes the greatest lessons came when people underestimated you. Today he had proven that knowledge, preparation, and calm reasoning could make an ordinary person extraordinary in the eyes of others, even in a room filled with doubt and skepticism. The judge watched him leave, a faint unease lingering. Something about this teenager did not fit the usual patterns he had seen throughout his career. There was more here than just a student with papers and dates. There was precision, there was strategy, and most of all, there was a mind that clearly worked differently than most 17-year-olds. The courtroom settled back into routine, but the impression of that day remained. A teenager, calm, composed, and articulate, had faced authority and spoken the truth with such clarity that even the judge had been forced to stop, think, and reconsider. It was a quiet moment of triumph, one that would not be forgotten by anyone present. Daniel walked out, not with arrogance, but with quiet assurance. He had done what he came to do: present the facts, make his case, and hold his ground with respect and intelligence. And in doing so, he had begun to change the way people looked at him, and perhaps the way they would view the unexpected brilliance hidden in ordinary appearances. The courtroom had quieted after the teenager's first statements. People shifted in their seats, some leaning forward, some whispering softly to their neighbors, trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed. There was an unusual energy in the room, a sense that something remarkable was unfolding. The judge, normally quick to dismiss youth, rubbed his forehead and stared down at the papers in front of him. He was unsettled. There was a precision in the teenager's words that he had not anticipated. It was as if every point had been carefully calculated, every phrase intentionally chosen. Daniel, the teenager, returned to his seat, his posture calm, his eyes steady. He wasn't nervous. He had expected skepticism, even scorn. But he also knew that confidence and preparation could change the course of perception, even in the sternest of courts. The opposing side, representing the school, shuffled papers nervously. Their initial confidence had begun to waver. They had assumed this would be an easy matter, a quick dismissal of a minor complaint. But Daniel's composure and clarity had shifted the dynamic. They exchanged brief glances, silently acknowledging that this was no ordinary student. The judge leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against the bench. "You seem very sure of yourself, young man," he said, his tone softer, though still carrying authority. "Explain why the school's procedures might not have accounted for your timeline." Daniel nodded slightly. "Your Honor, the school guidelines require that assignments be submitted by a specific time, and any extensions must be documented in writing. I submitted my work according to the standard rules and also requested confirmation of receipt, which was not provided. The misunderstanding appears to have occurred because the staff did not follow the written procedures." The judge frowned. "Procedures are followed by adults, not teenagers. How do you know that all of this applies?" Daniel opened his folder again, pulling out more documents. "I have emails confirming submission dates, timestamps showing when the files were sent, and notes from my correspondence with the staff. All of this shows that the instructions were followed on my end. The gap seems to have been on their side," the courtroom murmured quietly. People were leaning forward now, curious. Some had begun to whisper, speculating about the unusual confidence this teenager carried. It was rare, almost unheard of, to see someone so young navigate technicalities and present evidence with such precision. The judge narrowed his eyes, clearly struggling. "Very well," he said, "but this is still your word against theirs. How do we know that your timeline is accurate?" Daniel smiled faintly, a calm and polite smile. "Your Honor, the documents are time-stamped and verifiable. Anyone can check the records. This is not based on my memory alone." The teacher representing the school tried to interrupt, flustered. "But he's not a professional. He's just a student. He can't understand all the nuances." Daniel held up a hand gently. "With respect, I am only presenting facts as they appear in the documentation. Understanding the process is not about age. It's about following the rules and knowing what evidence exists. I have done my best to do that." The judge leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. He had to admit silently that this teenager was not just reciting memorized facts. There was reasoning behind every word, a logical structure that showed understanding and strategic thinking. As Daniel spoke, he began to draw connections that were subtle but precise. He pointed out inconsistencies in the school's documentation, small errors that an inexperienced observer might miss. He spoke clearly, but there was an elegance in the way he presented the facts, almost like a chess player planning several moves ahead. The judge's brow furrowed. "You are very thorough, I will give you that. But why are you so focused on this minor issue? Surely there are more important matters than a small school project." Daniel's eyes met the judge's, calm and steady. "Your Honor, the importance is in fairness and adherence to rules. Even small matters deserve proper consideration. If mistakes are overlooked, it undermines the system, no matter how minor the case may seem." The courtroom shifted again. There was a ripple of recognition among the spectators. They realized that this teenager was speaking not just for himself, but for principle. His words carried weight, and his reasoning was mature beyond his years. The teacher tried to regain control, speaking rapidly. "This is unnecessary. The facts are simple, and the matter should be closed. He is overcomplicating a straightforward situation." Daniel responded calmly without rising from his seat. "Your argument assumes that simplicity equals correctness, but clarity is only achieved when all relevant facts are considered. I am not overcomplicating. I am ensuring accuracy." The judge raised his hand to quiet the murmurs. You seem very clever, young man. I wonder, have you studied law?" Daniel smiled faintly. "I have studied legal procedures and familiarized myself with rules applicable to this situation, Your Honor. I believe preparation and understanding are more important than age." There was a pause. The judge stared at him, astonished. No teenager he had seen could speak like this without faltering. The precision, the clarity, the logical reasoning. It all pointed to someone with extraordinary ability. Spectators leaned forward, whispering softly to each other. "How old did he say he was?" one asked. 17, another whispered back. "But he talks like a lawyer." The judge, too, was beginning to reconsider. His previous assumptions about age and ability were crumbling. He realized that Daniel's arguments were not just based on memorized rules. There was strategic thinking, anticipation of counter-arguments, and careful presentation of evidence. Daniel continued, his voice calm, steady, and respectful. He presented a timeline of the events, referencing specific emails and communications, explaining how each step had been documented and why the misunderstanding had arisen. Every point he made was clear, supported, and deliberate. The courtroom listened in awe. Even the adults who had assumed superiority over a teenager were compelled to acknowledge the clarity and precision of his presentation. It was rare to see someone so young command attention not through arrogance, but through competence and intelligence. The judge finally leaned back, his expression a mixture of disbelief and reluctant respect. "You are thorough, and I cannot dismiss the points you have made. This is unusual for someone your age." Daniel nodded politely. "Thank you, Your Honor. I only wish for fairness and accuracy to be considered." For the first time that day, the judge was silent. He had underestimated this teenager entirely, assuming that youth meant inexperience. But now, faced with the calm confidence and clear reasoning before him, he realized that his assumptions had been flawed. The courtroom buzzed quietly with admiration. People whispered about Daniel's poise and skill, impressed that someone so young could handle a situation with such control and clarity. Even the opposing side, initially confident, found themselves struggling to respond effectively. Daniel returned to his seat, composed and unassuming. He did not seek praise or attention. He had only sought to present the truth and ensure that fairness was maintained. His quiet confidence and meticulous preparation had already begun to leave a mark on everyone in the room. The judge rubbed his temples and stared down at the paperwork, unable to ignore the fact that this teenager had presented his case in a way that was not only clear, but strategically sound. He had anticipated objections, addressed counterpoints, and maintained respect and composure throughout. It was becoming clear that Daniel was not an ordinary teenager. There was something unusual about the way he thought, the way he spoke, and the way he presented information. The judge's initial judgment, made in mere seconds based on age and appearance, was proving to be completely wrong. Daniel's presence in the courtroom had already shifted the dynamics. What had begun as a simple minor case was becoming a lesson in humility, strategy, and intelligence. People watched, silent and attentive, as he continued to quietly assert his position through facts, logic, and calm reasoning. The judge finally spoke again, his tone softer, tinged with surprise and curiosity. "Very well. I will hear the rest of your explanation. But I warn you, this court is not accustomed to being impressed by someone so young." Daniel nodded respectfully. "Understood, Your Honor. I will continue as briefly and clearly as possible." And with that, he began to outline the finer details, each word measured, each argument precise. The courtroom listened, captivated as the teenager demonstrated skill and intelligence far beyond what anyone had expected. The murmurs of skepticism were fading, replaced by a growing recognition that Daniel was exceptional. By the end of that session, it was clear. This was not a typical courtroom encounter, and this was not a typical teenager. Daniel had not only defended himself, but had begun to challenge the assumptions of everyone present. The seed of awe and respect had been planted, and it would only grow as the case continued. The courtroom felt different that morning. The usual hum of murmurs and rustling papers had taken on a quieter, more attentive tone. People weren't just waiting for the proceedings to begin. They were waiting to see what would happen next. Daniel sat quietly at his table, his papers neatly organized, his posture calm. He looked every bit like a teenager, but the air around him suggested something far more composed and capable. Spectators, attorneys, and even the judge were still processing what had happened the previous day. The judge, who normally dominated every courtroom he presided over, was now cautious. He tapped his pen on the desk, glanced at the clock, and studied Daniel carefully. There was an unusual energy in the room, one that hinted at something beyond the ordinary. Daniel, of course, noticed it too. He didn't flinch. Instead, he used it. He understood the subtle influence of presence and perception, even in a space dominated by authority. "Let us proceed," the judge said, his voice measured, though still carrying authority. "I want a detailed explanation of how you came to the conclusions you presented yesterday." Daniel nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." He rose and walked toward the front with the same quiet confidence he had shown before. Every step was deliberate. He didn't rush and he didn't hesitate. The courtroom seemed to shrink slightly around him, as if everyone subconsciously recognized that they were about to witness something unusual. He began methodically. "Your Honor, after reviewing all correspondence and documentation regarding the project, I noticed a pattern. The guidelines were clear, but the implementation by staff varied slightly. In some cases, requests for confirmation were overlooked, and in others, timestamps were misread or ignored. These small gaps led to misunderstandings." The judge raised an eyebrow. "You are saying minor mistakes caused this situation?" Daniel continued without pause. "Yes, Your Honor, but the minor mistakes are not the only issue. The way these mistakes were handled also lacked proper procedural follow-up. According to the rules, any discrepancy should be documented and clarified immediately. In this case, that step was skipped in multiple instances." The courtroom remained silent. Even the teacher representing the school seemed momentarily speechless. They had not anticipated the teenager would identify procedural errors so quickly and accurately. Most adults, even professionals, could miss details like these under pressure. Daniel opened a separate folder and pulled out a series of printed emails, carefully highlighted. "Here, Your Honor, are timestamps showing when communications were sent and received. Note that some requests for confirmation were never answered despite protocol. This clearly demonstrates the gaps in procedure." The judge leaned forward, peering at the papers. He frowned. "It seems thorough. But why are you so focused on detail? Aren't you missing the broader picture?" Daniel shook his head calmly. "With respect, Your Honor, the details are the broader picture. Accuracy and fairness in any process depend on understanding every step, no matter how small it seems. Ignoring details allows mistakes to persist, and small errors often grow into bigger problems." A murmur ran through the spectators. People began whispering to each other. "He's thinking like a professional." 17, someone muttered in disbelief. 17 and speaking like that? Even the teacher's confident posture had begun to falter. They tried to interject, but Daniel anticipated it. "If I may, Your Honor, the counter-arguments I have prepared also address concerns about relevance. Each point is connected directly to the outcome of the project and its evaluation." The judge's frown deepened. "You came prepared?" Daniel nodded slightly. "Yes, Your Honor. I reviewed possible objections and have evidence to respond to each." At that moment, the courtroom felt charged. There was a sense that Daniel was not just defending himself, but demonstrating a level of legal acumen that went beyond expectation. His arguments were structured, anticipatory, and precise, each one naturally leading to the next. He began to outline subtle patterns that had caused misunderstandings. "Your Honor, consider the case of the submission on the 5th day. The staff recorded it as late. However, my records show it was submitted on time, with confirmation requested but never received. By examining timestamps and internal notes, it's clear the error arose from oversight, not negligence. Furthermore, similar discrepancies on other dates suggest a systemic issue in procedural follow-through." The judge shifted uncomfortably. He had presided over hundreds of cases but had rarely encountered someone so young think strategically. Most teenagers, even articulate ones, lacked the ability to anticipate objections and link details logically. Daniel's reasoning was precise and deliberate, leaving no room for vague responses or defensive maneuvering. Daniel paused briefly to ensure the courtroom was following. He wasn't trying to intimidate. He was demonstrating clarity and logic. By following the correct documentation and verifying each step, we can resolve misunderstandings efficiently and fairly. This approach also prevents future errors, ensuring that no one is unfairly penalized for procedural lapses. The judge glanced around. The courtroom was silent, every eye on Daniel. Even the adults had begun to whisper quietly among themselves, admiring the teen's composure. There was a respect forming, subtle but unmistakable, that Daniel could feel. He continued, bringing in another layer of analysis. "Your Honor, I also reviewed the grading rubrics and the timelines for project submission. There are specific points in the procedure where approval should have been confirmed by multiple parties. In several instances, this step was skipped. While each oversight seems minor individually, together they produced confusion and incorrect assumptions. By identifying each point of failure, we can assign responsibility accurately and ensure fairness. The judge leaned back, a mixture of surprise and admiration crossing his features. He was struggling to reconcile his previous assumptions with the reality before him. He had assumed that a teenager would stumble, would be intimidated, or would misstate facts. But Daniel had presented a series of connected points, all based on evidence, all anticipating objections before they were raised. Daniel sensed the judge's hesitation and continued without aggression. "Your Honor, I am not attempting to challenge authority. I simply wish to ensure that rules are followed, evidence is considered, and fairness is maintained. This is not about age or appearance. It is about understanding and accuracy." There was a quiet shift in the room. The judge's stern demeanor softened, replaced by an analytical curiosity. He had underestimated Daniel, and now he could not ignore the meticulous reasoning unfolding before him. The teacher attempted to regain control. "Even if some mistakes occurred, the overall judgment of the project stands. It is excessive to focus on minor procedural issues." Daniel responded immediately, maintaining a calm tone. "With respect, Your Honor, focusing on procedural accuracy is not excessive. Fairness is determined by understanding every step and addressing errors where they occur. Ignoring these points risks repeating mistakes and creating unfair outcomes." The judge rubbed his temples. He had encountered adults who spoke with authority, but failed to provide substance. He had encountered students who lacked confidence and precision, but he had never seen a teenager combine composure, clarity, and strategic thought so effortlessly. Daniel's calm voice, logical flow, and clear evidence left him momentarily speechless. Spectators whispered softly, some shaking their heads in disbelief. "He's more than prepared." "He's brilliant," one said. "Yes," another replied. "It's like he's been trained for this." Daniel continued, pointing out details others had overlooked. "Your Honor, there is also the issue of timing in communications. Emails and submissions were time-stamped incorrectly by the system in some cases, leading staff to believe that deadlines were missed. Cross-referencing internal logs and external records confirms the actual submission times, which comply with rules." The courtroom felt a subtle tension. Daniel's voice never rose. It remained calm, respectful, but his arguments were sharp and undeniable. Even the judge could not argue with the evidence. Every point was clear, every conclusion logical, every counter-argument anticipated. By the end of his presentation, it was evident that Daniel had turned what seemed like a simple, minor case into a demonstration of precision, reasoning, and strategy. The judge, who had begun the proceedings with condescension, now regarded the teenager with a mixture of astonishment and respect. Daniel returned to his seat, his calm demeanor unchanged. He had not raised his voice, shown frustration, or demanded recognition. He had simply presented facts, reasoning, and evidence with skill and confidence far beyond what anyone expected from someone his age. The judge leaned back, staring at Daniel. "You have clearly studied this extensively," he said slowly, almost in awe. "Your understanding of procedure and strategy, it is unusual for someone your age." Daniel nodded politely. "I have prepared thoroughly, Your Honor. I respect the court and its processes, and I wanted to ensure that all relevant information was presented accurately." A quiet murmur spread through the courtroom. People were no longer just curious. They were impressed. They had watched a teenager navigate legal complexities, anticipate objections, and present evidence with a clarity and precision that left even seasoned adults astonished. The teacher, who had initially dismissed Daniel as inexperienced, now looked uncertain. They had not anticipated encountering someone who could present arguments so strategically and with such composure. It was clear that Daniel's abilities went far beyond the ordinary. The judge took a deep breath and adjusted his robe. He realized that he had misjudged this teenager completely. Daniel was not only capable but was thinking several steps ahead, anticipating every move, and presenting logic that could challenge even experienced professionals. By the end of the session, it was evident. Daniel was exceptional. He had not only defended himself, but had begun to shift the assumptions of everyone present. His calm intelligence, clear reasoning, and strategic approach left a mark that would not be forgotten. And in the quiet moments as he sat back down, Daniel knew that the real test was not just winning this case, but maintaining this clarity and strategic thinking in the moments ahead. The courtroom had seen a glimpse of his abilities, but the story was far from over. The courtroom was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy and electric at the same time. Everyone present was aware that something unusual was happening, though no one could yet put a name to it. Daniel had already proven himself beyond expectations. The judge, who had entered the proceedings with skepticism and mild annoyance, was now watching the teenager with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. He had seen confidence before, even intelligence, but what Daniel displayed went far beyond the norm. Daniel rose once more, moving toward the front with his calm, deliberate steps. His movements were confident but not showy, and every eye followed him. Even the teacher representing the school leaned forward in their chair, as if bracing for something they could not yet understand. "Your Honor," Daniel began, his voice steady and polite, "I have presented the evidence, timelines, and communications as clearly as possible. I would like to address any remaining questions to ensure fairness and clarity before a decision is reached." The judge sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Questions from whom? You've addressed everything thoroughly. At this point, it seems you understand the rules and procedures better than anyone in this room." A small murmur ran through the spectators. Some exchanged glances, whispering quietly. "It's like he's not just a teenager," one said softly. Daniel's eyes remained calm. "Your Honor, I understand that my age may have caused some assumptions, but my goal has always been to present facts accurately and ensure that fairness is maintained. I am prepared to answer any questions about the documentation or procedures." At that moment, a clerk from the back of the courtroom approached the judge quietly. They whispered something into his ear, and the judge's eyes widened slightly. He leaned back, adjusting his glasses, and stared at Daniel as if seeing him for the first time. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Daniel, sensing nothing unusual had been revealed, continued calmly. "I am confident that a careful review of the facts will clarify any misunderstandings and lead to a fair outcome." The judge cleared his throat, his voice softer now, tinged with surprise. "Daniel, is that truly your name?" "Yes, Your Honor," Daniel replied politely. The judge paused for a moment, collecting his thoughts. "And your age?" "You are 17? "Yes, Your Honor," Daniel said, his voice calm. The judge's expression shifted. He looked at the clerk, then back at Daniel. "I was just informed. Is it true that you are a licensed attorney?" The courtroom erupted into a mixture of gasps and whispered exclamations. Spectators leaned forward, stunned. The teacher representing the school blinked, unable to speak. The judge himself seemed momentarily lost for words, a rare occurrence for someone so accustomed to authority and control. Daniel remained calm, almost serene. "Yes, Your Honor. I have been practicing under supervision, though I have not disclosed this previously. I appeared today as a student to ensure a fair review of the situation, without preconceived assumptions based on my legal experience." The judge leaned back, his hand hovering over his mouth. "You are a practicing attorney?" "In disguise." Daniel nodded politely. "Correct, Your Honor. My intention was never to deceive, but to demonstrate that age and appearance do not necessarily reflect knowledge, preparation, or understanding." A hush fell over the courtroom. Everyone was processing the revelation. Spectators whispered in disbelief. "He's a teenager and an attorney? Under disguise?" Another whispered. "No wonder he spoke so precisely." The judge cleared his throat again, his voice firmer but carrying a note of respect. "I must admit, I underestimated you completely. Your age led me to make assumptions that were clearly incorrect. This is remarkable." Daniel remained humble. "I only sought to ensure fairness, Your Honor. I respect the court and its processes, and I wanted to present my side accurately, without any bias that might arise from my professional status." The teacher representing the school finally spoke, their voice shaking slightly. This changes everything. We had assumed this was a straightforward matter. I did not realize the skill and experience you possess." Daniel nodded gently. "I understand. My goal has always been clarity, evidence, and fairness. I hope that can be recognized regardless of the initial assumptions about my age." The judge leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. You have not only presented facts accurately but have demonstrated strategic thinking, anticipation of objections, and precise reasoning far beyond your years. This is extraordinary. The spectators in the courtroom were still whispering, their amazement evident. Some shook their heads, trying to process the idea that a teenager could possess the skill, knowledge, and composure of a professional attorney. The realization rippled through the room. This was not just a capable student, this was a prodigy. A rare mind disguised as youth. Daniel continued, calm and composed, addressing the implications of his work without ego. Your Honor, I have only sought to ensure that no procedural gaps result in unfairness. The rules are designed to protect all parties, and by presenting the facts accurately, we ensure the integrity of the process. The judge, still stunned, nodded slowly. Integrity indeed. I should apologize for underestimating you. My assumptions were based solely on your age and appearance, and they were completely wrong. Daniel smiled faintly, polite and respectful. Thank you, Your Honor. Your acknowledgement means a great deal. My intention was never to challenge authority personally, only to present the truth accurately and fairly. The courtroom shifted. The teacher, though still in shock, now showed a measure of respect. I cannot deny your skill. This is extraordinary. We must reconsider our stance and proceed with full acknowledgement of your expertise. Even the spectators, previously curious, now watched in awe. The courtroom had transformed from a scene of minor dispute to a moment of revelation. Daniel, the teenager, had not only presented his case flawlessly but had quietly revealed a truth that left everyone reevaluating their assumptions. The judge cleared his throat again, this time firmly but with respect. Daniel, I am not only impressed but humbled. Your preparation, your reasoning, and your composure are exceptional. I have never encountered anyone like you at any age, let alone 17. Daniel nodded, calm as ever. Your Honor, I appreciate your words. My goal has always been to ensure fairness and clarity. Age is not a measure of understanding or competence, and I hope my example demonstrates that principle. The spectators erupted in quiet murmurs, some shaking their heads, some whispering excitedly. The courtroom was buzzing with a mixture of astonishment and admiration. The revelation of Daniel's true identity had not only altered the dynamics of the case but had fundamentally changed the way everyone perceived him. The teacher, still gathering composure, spoke again. We accept that. Your knowledge and skill are evident. We must proceed with this understanding in mind. Daniel nodded politely. Thank you. That is all I ask. The judge leaned back, exhaling slowly. He had entered the courtroom ready to assert authority, perhaps even belittle a teenager he assumed was inexperienced. Instead, he had witnessed a remarkable mind at work, a combination of youth and expertise that defied every expectation. I must reconsider everything I assumed, the judge said quietly, almost to himself. I assumed inexperience, yet I see wisdom. I assumed weakness, yet I see strength. You have taught us all an important lesson. Daniel's composure never wavered. Your Honor, it was never my intention to teach a lesson personally. I only sought to ensure fairness and clarity, and to demonstrate that preparation, reasoning, and respect matter more than assumptions. The courtroom had shifted completely. Spectators were no longer casual observers. They were witnesses to an extraordinary event. The initial story of a teenager being belittled had transformed into something far greater, a demonstration of brilliance, humility, and strategic thinking. Even the judge, known for his authority and confidence, could not help but feel a sense of humility. He had assumed too much, judged too quickly, and now faced the truth. Daniel was exceptional, not because of age or appearance, but because of skill, intelligence, and composure. The teacher representing the school nodded slowly. We accept that now. Your preparation and clarity have left no room for doubt. We will proceed with fairness. Daniel returned to his seat, maintaining calm and politeness. There was no arrogance, no boasting, only quiet assurance and respect for the court. He had revealed his true identity without spectacle, allowing his skill and reasoning to speak for themselves. The courtroom remained silent for a moment, the air thick with disbelief and admiration. Daniel, the teenager attorney, had changed everything. He had not only defended himself, but had subtly shifted the assumptions, expectations, and respect of everyone present. The judge finally spoke, with a mixture of awe and respect. Daniel, your abilities are extraordinary. I apologize for underestimating you. You have proven that competence is not limited by age, and that preparation and clarity can command respect even in the face of authority." Daniel nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor. That acknowledgement is meaningful." And as the courtroom absorbed the revelation, the story of the teenager attorney began to spread beyond its walls. What started as a simple dispute had become a lesson in humility, preparation, and the unexpected brilliance hidden behind youth. Daniel had revealed his secret quietly, strategically, and respectfully. The impact was profound. Everyone in the room had witnessed something rare. A mind capable of navigating complexity, thinking several steps ahead, and earning respect through skill, evidence, and composure rather than appearance. The judge leaned back, his gaze still on Daniel. He realized that this case would not be forgotten, not by him, not by the teacher, not by anyone who had witnessed the transformation from assumed inexperience to undeniable expertise. Daniel, for his part, remained calm, composed, and respectful. He had presented the truth, revealed his identity, and ensured fairness, all without arrogance. And in doing so, he had left an indelible impression on everyone in that courtroom. The courtroom had never been so quiet. The revelation that Daniel, the seemingly ordinary teenager, was in fact a practicing attorney had left everyone stunned. People were still absorbing the reality that they had underestimated someone based solely on age and appearance. Even the judge, who was usually so composed and assertive, seemed reflective, almost humbled by what he had witnessed. Daniel returned to his seat calmly, folding his hands and maintaining the same quiet confidence that had marked his entire time in the courtroom. He didn't look for praise, he didn't smile boastfully, and he didn't allow the moment to inflate his ego. He had done what he intended: present the truth, uphold fairness, and demonstrate that skill and preparation matter more than assumptions or appearances. The judge finally spoke, his voice steady but carrying respect. "Daniel, I want to make something clear. My earlier assumptions were completely wrong. I underestimated your abilities, and I treated you with condescension because of your age. For that, I apologize. Today you have reminded us all of a lesson many of us forget. Never judge by appearances." Daniel nodded politely. "Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate your acknowledgement. My intention was never to challenge authority, only to ensure that the truth was presented accurately and fairly." The spectators in the courtroom whispered among themselves. Some shook their heads in disbelief, some smiled in admiration. One parent leaned toward another and said quietly, "I wish my children could see this. It's inspiring. To see someone so young, so capable, handle themselves like that." Even the teacher representing the school was thoughtful. "I misjudged you entirely," they said. "I assumed you were inexperienced and would struggle, but your knowledge, preparation, and reasoning are remarkable. I hope this experience serves as a lesson to all of us in humility and fairness." Daniel responded calmly. "I hope it does. We all make assumptions sometimes, but the important thing is to recognize them and remain open to understanding the truth." The judge, still reflecting on the situation, spoke again. "This courtroom has witnessed something unusual today. It's rare to see a young person demonstrate not only intelligence but also maturity, preparation, and respect. Your actions remind us that wisdom and skill are not determined by age." Daniel remained silent, listening. He understood that this acknowledgement carried weight. The judge's words were not just about the case, they were about the lesson learned, the humility gained, and the broader understanding of human potential. Outside the courtroom, news of the incident began to spread quickly. Journalists who had been covering minor local disputes were now captivated by the story of a teenager attorney revealing his true identity in court. Social media buzzed with admiration, disbelief, and inspiration. People marveled at how Daniel had handled the entire situation with calm precision, never seeking attention, but letting his preparation and skill speak for themselves. Daniel's story became an example for many, not just in the legal world, but for anyone who had ever been underestimated. It was a reminder that assumptions based on age, appearance, or background could be misleading. True ability, preparation, and integrity could shine through even in unexpected forms. Back in the courtroom, the judge reviewed the documentation carefully. He wanted to ensure that Daniel's points were fully understood and fairly evaluated. Each email, timestamp, and procedural note had been presented clearly, leaving little room for doubt. The school representative now acknowledged the accuracy of Daniel's claims. and even the opposition recognized the professionalism with which he had approached the case. "Daniel," the judge said, his tone softer and sincere, "you have shown more than knowledge. You have shown patience, composure, and integrity. These qualities, combined with your skill, are rare at any age. I hope that today serves as a turning point, not only for this case, but as a lesson for all who witnessed it." Daniel nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor. My hope is that fairness and clarity are maintained in all matters, no matter how minor or how major. That is the most important outcome." The courtroom began to return to normal, but the impact of the day lingered. Spectators filed out slowly, discussing the extraordinary events they had just witnessed. Teachers, students, parents, and other visitors were inspired, reflecting on the assumptions they might have made in their own lives, and how they could approach situations with more humility and respect. For the judge, the experience was transformative. He had always prided himself on his authority and experience, yet he had been reminded in a powerful way that assumptions could mislead even the most seasoned professionals. He realized that respect should be earned through skill and integrity, not assumed based on age, appearance, or status. "Perhaps I have been too quick to judge in the past," he said quietly to himself, reviewing the notes from Daniel's presentation. "There are lessons here beyond the case itself." Daniel left the courtroom quietly, unnoticed by many at first, but the few who watched him exit were struck by his composure. There was no celebration, no dramatic exit, just a calm acknowledgement that he had fulfilled his purpose. His goal had never been to impress for personal gain. It had been to ensure fairness, clarity, and respect for the process. Outside, a small group of people had gathered, having followed the story. They approached Daniel politely, some offering congratulations, others asking for advice or insight into how he had prepared so thoroughly. Daniel answered each question patiently, sharing his thoughts on preparation, attention to detail, and the importance of evidence and clarity. "It's all about understanding the process," he explained. "Whether you're young or old, the rules exist to ensure fairness. If you take the time to understand them and prepare, you can make sure the right outcome is reached." People listened intently, inspired by his humility and focus. It wasn't just his legal skill that impressed them, it was his character, his dedication to integrity, and the calm way he carried himself under pressure. The school representative approached Daniel as well. "I underestimated you completely," they said. "Your insight and preparation were incredible. We have learned a lot from this experience." Daniel nodded politely. "I hope it can serve as a reminder that preparation, honesty, and respect matter more than assumptions or appearances." In the following days, the story of the teenager attorney spread further. News articles, social media posts, and word-of-mouth accounts highlighted the remarkable events in the courtroom. People everywhere were inspired by the tale, seeing it as a reminder that true ability often lies beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. For the judge, it became a teaching moment. He spoke to colleagues and students about the importance of humility, preparation, and the danger of assumptions. He told the story of Daniel's composure and insight, emphasizing that age and appearance do not determine ability. Daniel, meanwhile, continued his work quietly. He remained focused on his cases, his studies, and his commitment to fairness. He did not seek fame or recognition, but he had earned it naturally through his actions. People admired him not just for his intellect, but for his character, the calm, respectful, and thoughtful way he approached every challenge. The courtroom where it had all happened became a place of reflection. People remembered the day a teenager had quietly but powerfully demonstrated that knowledge, preparation, and integrity could surpass expectations. It became a story told again and again, a reminder that brilliance can come from the most unexpected places, and that humility and fairness are always rewarded in the end. Even the teacher, once skeptical, began to encourage students to think critically and prepare thoroughly. Using Daniel's example as inspiration, the lesson was clear. Never underestimate anyone, because true ability is often hidden, and respect must be earned through skill, preparation, and integrity, not assumed through appearances or titles. Daniel himself continued quietly, always respectful, always prepared, and always focused on doing what was right. His actions left a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed them. reminding the world that true brilliance is not about showing off. It is about understanding, preparing, and acting with integrity, even when no one expects it. And so, the story ended not with fanfare or dramatic celebration, but with quiet respect and lasting lessons. Daniel had faced doubt, condescension, and skepticism, and he had turned it all into an example of intelligence, humility, and integrity. The courtroom, the spectators, the judge, and the teacher all carried that lesson forward, changed by the extraordinary example of a teenager who proved that true skill and fairness know no age. The world outside would continue to hear about Daniel's remarkable day in court, and people would continue to be inspired by his example. It became a story of hope, a story of fairness, and a story of unexpected brilliance. And for Daniel, the lesson was simple. Focus on truth, preparation, and integrity, and let the results speak for themselves.